These are the 5 wide receivers that are going to make or break fantasy football in 2024. Wide receiver is easily the most important position in all of fantasy football. It is so important to catch those breakout guys before anybody else, but there's also so many traps at the top of the draft board, so let me help guide you through this crazy landscape. The first player I want to talk about is Brandon Aiyuk, going at pick 36 on ESPN, at 20 on Sleeper, and 18 on Underdog Fantasy. Aiyuk is simply one of the best route runners in the whole NFL and has potential to be a top 10 wide receiver. But the problem is, if he stays in the 49ers, I don't see how he gets above 16 points per game. Last year, he averaged 15.6, and he was by far the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL. On many different sites, he graded out as the wide receiver 1 on the season. Now, obviously, there are some wide receivers that are better than him, but by a play-by-play basis, the charting from like PFF and Open Score and stuff like that by ESPN, they loved him. But we all know the big problem is his situation. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey cannot go multiple weeks without getting insane workloads. Aiyuk had big games last year, but all those big games would be like 5 catches, 106 yards, and maybe a touchdown, which is great. That type of efficiency is what you want in a receiver. The problem is, I want more than 10 targets a game. I want more than 12 targets a game. This dude is struggling to get like 6 or 7. The thing that really sets him behind Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, those types, is those guys get the schemed up screens and whatnot, the easy catches near the line of scrimmage. That's all for Deebo and CMC, and even sometimes for George Kittle. So if he gets traded to a good situation and goes from 105 targets that he had last year to something where they can give him like 140, 150, yeah, he could go for 1,600 yards. I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm sorry, Commanders fans, Washington is not the right situation for him. But if he stays in the 49ers, I think last year is about the peak of what we can see from him. So at pick 36 on ESPN, more than fine with that, but at pick 20 and 18, that's where I'm kind of like, there's probably better options. The second wide receiver is Michael Pittman Jr., currently going at pick 18 on ESPN, 34 on Sleeper, and 33 on Underdog. Pittman was absolutely force-fed at 9.8 targets per game last year. Minshew had his number. He also finished with exactly 15.6 points per game, just like Brandon Aiyuk, but he did it in such a different way. He had 51 more targets. The simple reality is he's a pretty good slot receiver that eats up a lot of volume, but he doesn't really mesh with the quarterback now in Anthony Richardson. The way Richardson plays is a lot of deep balls. That's where he's most accurate. His accuracy over the middle needs a lot of work. And something we really don't talk about last year was all the red zone production that was lost because JT was out for a lot of the year and AR was out for a lot of the year. I see those guys running a ton in the red zone. MPJ had 19 targets in the red zone last year. That was 9th in the league. I think that kind of has to go down. I can't justify spending a 2nd or 3rd round pick on a guy that's pretty much reached his ceiling. I need a guy who I can at least think has a chance to make it into round 1 or early round 2 in upcoming years. I see him catching a couple less balls and averaging like 14.5 points per game. That's fine, but on pick 18 in ESPN, not worth it. Our next wide receiver is a guy that's just like Michael Pittman Jr., but much later in the draft and much more explosive. I'm talking about McConkey, going at pick 96 on ESPN, 90 on Sleeper, and 69 on Underdog. Just like Pittman, he's going to be in the slot getting a ton of targets per game, but he's on a pretty run-heavy offense, but his quarterback is Justin Herbert, who is way more accurate over the middle of the field. We've seen the success that Keenan Allen has had. The difference there is McConkey runs a 4.39. He is an absolute burner and can do stuff after the catch that Keenan only wishes he could do. The main downside I have in these run-type offenses is that McConkey is pretty frail. I'm not sure how much he'll be used in blocking sets, so like there's 2 wide receiver sets. He may get subbed off a decent amount. That's gonna hurt, but hopefully throughout the year he proves himself to the coaches in that area, and then he gets to 7 to 9 targets per game. That would be elite. We've been able to see Joshua Palmer actually flash sides of upside in this situation. McConkey is 10 times the receiver he is. I could see him having a very similar season to Rashee Rice and the Chiefs last year, starting off a bit slow, getting acclimated to the league, then finding his role and absolutely winning you a championship. And before the final 2 picks, make sure you guys are playing all these on Underdog Fantasy, where they have a $15 million prize pool for Best Ball Mania. First place gets $1.5 million. I've already entered 31 drafts into this contest. I'm gonna win. But when you join with code DNR, they'll match your first deposit up to $250, so take advantage of that. Our 4th wide receiver is Houston Texans' Tank Dell, going at pick 53 on ESPN, 50 on Sleeper, and 35 on Underdog. I think out of Diggs, Nico, and Dell has the most talent and could actually be a top 10 guy at the end of this year. I think Diggs is slipping off the face of the earth a little bit, and Nico was very good, but a lot of his production came when Tank was out last year. When they were both on the field, whether you like it or not, Tank was the number 1 guy. He had an open score of 81, which was tied with Brandon Aiyuk and only 1 spot behind Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown and 3 spots behind Tyreek Hill. This is basically the stat uses to quantify how good of a route runner you are. This dude is absolutely electric. This is one of those times where you need to shoot for upside. It is very rare that we get a wide receiver of this caliber going in the 50s in a situation with CJ Stroud and such a good offense around him. The reason he's going so light is because people don't want to have to choose between Diggs, Nico Collins, and Dell. It's very hard. But I'm going to go with the cheapest guy that has the most upside in my eyes, and his quarterback has raved about him all the time. CJ Stroud is the reason the Texans drafted Tank Dell, and on top of that, he puts him as his top 3 receivers in the league. If you guys remember Jalen Waddle from 2 years ago, his 18 yards per reception, how efficient he was, I think you could see a very similar season with Tank Dell. And after that season, people were drafting Jalen Waddle early in the second round the next year. I've also been hearing some people think Tank Dell is injury prone because he's small. If you guys actually go back and look at the play he got hurt on, 3 offensive and defensive linemen fell on his leg while he was blocking. I don't care who you are, that is the main offensive lineman injury that they sustain themselves. Like, it doesn't matter how small he is, any wide receivers breaking their leg there. Now, our final wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., picked 22 on ESPN, 14 on Sleeper, and 13 on Underdog. I don't know if this is an uncommon opinion, but Kyler Murray is a top 10 quarterback when he's actually healthy and playing well. I get that Trey McBride did break out towards the end of the year, and I still love him a lot for this year in fantasy, but that was because there was literally no one else to throw to. Marvin Harrison is going to command at least 8+ targets a game instantly. People forget that Hopkins, in terms of points per game, was a top 15 wide receiver all 3 years he was on the Cardinals. He was just hurt the last 2. But we got to remember, his first year hopping on that team, he had 1,400 yards in a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which was completely based around horizontal plays. This offense now is much more vertical and downfield. Kyler Murray is great at extending plays on his own, and he's going to find a bunch of deep shots to Marvin Harrison. Mark my words. Marvin is going to be able to run the full route tree from day one. He's one of the most pro-ready receivers we've seen in a while. His college production was off the charts, and he has no other wide receiver competition at all. In a division with so many other good offenses, and the Cardinals themselves don't have a great defense, I could see a lot of shootouts where the Cardinals are forced to play fast and pass a lot. This is something that is proven to always lead to fantasy points. He may start off slow because he is a rookie, but by the end of the year, I expect Jamar Chase levels of production. Next up, I'll do 5 quarterbacks and tight ends that can make or break fantasy football, so leave a like on this, drop a comment what other types of videos you want to see, drop a follow, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.